The county fair badge had been pinned inside an old work apron for 26 years, and when I turned over, I found my younger brother's name written beneath mine in a hand I recognized as my wife's. I was 68 then, retired from tuning church organs across western Pennsylvania. Most people think an organ tuner spends his life listening for beautiful notes. The truth is, you spend more time hearing what is wrong. A pipe a fraction sharp, a valve closing too slowly, air escaping where no one else can detect it. The badge came from the Mercer County Fair in 1996. Exhibitor, Thomas Keller. My name, under the folded edge, written in blue ink. Let Daniel enter under Tom's number. One day only, my wife, Ruth, had written that. Daniel had been dead 7 years. We had not spoken during the last 14 years of his life. The badge should not have mattered. It was cheap cardboard under cloudy plastic, with a rusted pin and a yellow ribbon that had once been red. I had found it while looking for an apron to wear in the workshop. I still repaired small reed organs for friends, though my knees no longer like pedals and my hearing was not what it had been. Ruth came in carrying folded laundry and saw the badge in my hand. She stopped, not dramatically. Ruth never did anything dramatically. She just set the towels down too carefully. What does this mean? I asked. Her eyes went to the writing. I thought I threw that away. What did Daniel enter under my number? She sat in the chair beside the workbench. For a long moment, she looked older than 70. Then she said, "Something you won a prize for." I stared at her. I never entered anything at that fair. Ruth folded her hands in her lap. I know. In 1996, I was 42 and making a good living traveling between churches, theaters, and old funeral homes where the organs had not been properly serviced since Eisenhower. Daniel was 37. He had never held a job longer than 3 years. That was how I described him then. Not dishonest, not dangerous, unreliable. He repaired furniture, painted houses, delivered appliances, and once spent 6 months selling handmade birdhouses along Route 19. He had talent in his hands and no patience for the part of life that asks talent to arrive every morning at 8. Our father had admired him. That was part of the trouble. Dad was a carpenter and believed anything made by hand carried more truth than anything made by salary. Daniel inherited his eye for wood, his charm, and his habit of treating deadlines as personal insults. I inherited the business sense. When Dad died, he left us his workshop jointly. Daniel wanted to keep it. I wanted to sell. We argued for 2 years before I bought him out at a price. He called insulting, and I called realistic. After that, he stopped coming to Sunday dinners. The Mercer County Fair happened the summer after the sale. Ruth volunteered at the church pie booth. Our daughter, Emily, was 16 and entered a watercolor in the youth exhibit. I spent most of Saturday tuning a pipe organ in Grove City and arrived near closing. Someone stopped me by the livestock pavilion. "Congratulations, Tom." I had no idea what he meant. At the agricultural hall, a walnut writing desk stood beneath a blue ribbon. Clean lines, hand-cut drawers, a narrow hidden shelf behind the back panel. The kind of detail our father loved. The entry card said, Thomas Keller, first place, furniture craft. I assumed the fair office had confused me with another Thomas Keller. Ruth said, maybe somebody entered it as a joke. The desk was gone when I returned the next morning. I never asked again. Now, more than 2 decades later, Ruth told me Daniel had entered under my number. Why? I asked. She looked toward the workshop door. Because he needed you to win. That answer made less sense than the badge. I asked Ruth where the desk had come from. She said Daniel built it in our father's old workshop after I bought him out. He still had a key for several months because I had not changed the lock. I knew that. I had noticed shavings on the floor once and assumed he was taking scraps that belonged to him. You helped him enter it? I asked. Yes. Using my name? Yes. Why would you do that? Ruth's mouth tightened. Because you would not have listened if his name was on it. That angered me because it sounded possible. She said Daniel had approached her in June with a plan. He wanted to build one final piece using Dad's designs, enter it under my exhibitor number, and let me discover it after judging. He thought if you saw what he could still do, you might let him work in the shop again. So he lied. You had already decided the truth about him. I stood up. That is not an answer. No, Ruth said. It is the beginning of one. The blue ribbon came with a cash award, $500. I had never received it. Ruth said Daniel collected the prize because he had the badge. What did he do with the money? I don't know. That was the first thing she said I did not believe. Emily was 42 by then, married, with 2 sons and a job teaching middle school music. I called her that evening. Do you remember the writing desk at the fair? Silence. Emily? I remember. Did you know Uncle Daniel made it? Yes. The certainty in her voice hurt more than surprise would have. Who told you? He did. When? At the fair. I sat down. Emily had gone behind the exhibit hall that afternoon and found Daniel loading the desk into a borrowed van. He asked her not to tell me. Why would you agree? Her voice became small. Because he said the prize money was for me. Emily had been accepted into a summer music program in Boston. I remembered the argument about it. She wanted to go. I said it cost too much. Ruth said we could manage. I said managing was not the same as affording, and that music camps were luxuries for families who did not have a roof needing replacement. Emily stopped asking. 2 weeks later, a scholarship arrived. That was what we believed. The letter said an anonymous donor had paid $500 toward her tuition. Ruth and I covered the rest. Emily attended the program, met a teacher who encouraged her toward music education, and changed the direction of her life. There was no scholarship? I asked. No. Daniel paid it? With the fair money. I looked at Ruth. You knew. She nodded. How many people in this family have been waiting for me to ask the right question? Ruth flinched, and I regretted the tone, not the question. Emily told me Daniel built the desk because he needed the prize, but also because he wanted to prove something to himself after losing the workshop. He said Grandpa used to tell him judges only see the finished piece, she said. They do not see whether the man who made it paid his electric bill. That sounded like Daniel. Proud, funny wounded. Why use my name? Emily hesitated. Because he was barred from entering. Why? He had missed payments to the Fair Commission for booth space the year before. Of course he had. Daniel had sold birdhouses at the previous fair, promised to pay the final fee after sales, and never did. The commission refused his new entry. So he used my name, a generous act built on dishonesty, a gift that required everyone to keep quiet. I should have felt grateful. Instead, I felt managed. What happened to the desk? I asked. Emily said she did not know. Ruth did. She waited until after the call. Daniel sold it, she said. To whom? Your father. For a moment, I thought age had confused her. My father was dead. Ruth looked at the badge in my hand. No, Tom, he wasn't. Our father died in 1998. The fair was 2 years earlier. That was the first major twist. For all those years, I had remembered the workshop sale as something that happened after Dad died. It did not. Dad suffered a stroke in 1994. He lost most of his speech and moved into a nursing home. I became his legal guardian. Daniel visited often at first, then less after the workshop argument. I sold Dad's tools and bought out Daniel's share while Dad was still alive. I told myself I needed money for his care. That was true. I also wanted control of the workshop. That was true, too. Daniel sold the desk to Dad for $1. Ruth had the receipt, not hidden in a wall or discovered inside a box. She had kept it with the nursing home statements because she believed one day I might be able to read it without turning it into a fight. The desk was delivered to Dad's room. I never saw it there. Because you stopped visiting on weekdays, Ruth said. I visited every Sunday. You stayed 20 minutes. I had work. You had guilt. That landed hard. Dad could no longer say much, but he could still move his right hand. Daniel built the desk at wheelchair height, so Dad could open the drawers. Inside, Daniel kept sandpaper with samples and photographs of old jobs they had done together. Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked. Dad tried. He could barely speak. He pointed to the drawer every time you came. I remembered that. Dad tapping the arm of his chair, pointing toward the window, making the same frustrated sound. I assumed he wanted the blinds adjusted. Ruth said the desk had been against that wall. Where did it go after he died? She looked down. Daniel took it. Without asking me, he said it belonged to him. It belonged to the estate. There it was, the old language, ownership, receipts, rights. Ruth said softly, "That is why he stopped trying with you." Daniel and I did not speak after Dad's service except through lawyers. He claimed several hand tools and the desk. I said the tools had been sold legally and the desk was estate property. He called me a thief. I called him a parasite. Both of us knew where to place words so they would hurt longest. The state attorney decided the desk had little cash value and was not worth fighting over. Daniel kept it. I did not see him again for 14 years. During that time, he married a woman named Kay. They moved to West Virginia. He worked on historic houses, then taught woodworking in a vocational program. I knew these things because Ruth told me, and I pretended not to care. When Daniel developed heart trouble, Emily visited him. I did not. He asked for you, she told me once. What did he want? To talk. About what? He did not say. Then he can call. He never did. After learning about the badge, I contacted Kay. She answered in a calm voice that made me aware of how nervous I was. Thomas, she said. No one called me Thomas except people who did not know me or people who knew me too well. I need to ask about a desk. I wondered whether that would be your reason. What does that mean? It means Daniel was right. You still need a thing before you will ask about a person. I almost ended the call. Instead, I said, I am trying. Kay was quiet. All right. The desk was in a vocational school in Charleston. Daniel donated it before he died. On the underside of the center drawer, he carved 3 names. Our father's. His. Mine. He wanted students to see how the joints were made. Kay said. He said the desk belonged anywhere people were still learning. I asked why Daniel wanted to speak with me near the end. Kay took a slow breath. He wanted to tell you the prize was not really for Emily. I thought I understood the story. Daniel had entered the desk under my name, won the money, and used it for Emily's music program. Kay said that was only part of it. The fair prize was $1,000, not $500. Daniel gave half to Emily. He gave the other half to Ruth. I turned toward my wife. She was sitting across the room, both hands resting on her knees. For what? I asked. Ruth said nothing. Kay answered, for your father's medication. That summer, Dad's insurance stopped covering a drug that reduced the muscle spasms in his right arm. Without it, he could not hold a pencil, open a drawer, or feed himself without help. I had declined the prescription. I remembered the doctor discussing it. I remembered the cost. I remembered saying the benefit seemed too small for price. Ruth disagreed. Daniel found out. He told Ruth he would pay for 3 months. Kay said, long enough to appeal the insurance decision. Why didn't you tell me? I asked Ruth, because you'd already said no. I was his guardian. You were his son. The room went quiet. Ruth had accepted Daniel's money without telling me. The medication worked well enough for Dad to use a desk, sort small pieces of wood, and write a few shaky words. One of those words was my name. The second major twist was not that Daniel used the prize to help Emily. It was that he built the desk and won the money so our father could use his hand again after I had decided the improvement was not worth cost. Daniel's deceit gave Dad 2 final years of small independence. My caution had nearly taken them away. But Daniel was not blameless. He used the money to force his way back into Dad's life. He told Ruth not to tell me because he wanted the victory to be his. He let help become proof that he was a better son. Kay said he admitted that near the end. He said, loving your father made him generous, she told me. Competing with you made him cruel. Both things could live in one man. They lived in me too. I went to Charleston with Ruth and Emily. The vocational school occupied an old brick building beside railroad tracks. The woodworking teacher, a broad woman named Patrice, led us to a room filled with sawdust, clamps, and half-finished cabinets. The desk stood near the windows. Age had darkened the walnut. Students had left faint pencil marks underneath. One drawer stuck slightly before sliding free. I placed my hand on the top. For the first time, I understood why Dad had tapped toward the window. The center drawer contained a shallow tray with grooves for pencils and small tools. In the back corner was a depression worn smooth by his thumb. Patrice showed us the names underneath. Arthur Keller, Daniel Keller, Thomas Keller. My name had been added last. When I asked, Daniel carved it before he donated the desk. Patrice said, he told me the three names belonged together, even if the men did not. I stepped away because my legs felt unreliable. Emily opened the narrow hidden shelf. Inside were copies of Dad's final handwriting exercises, not secret messages. The school used them to show students how furniture can be adapted for limited movement. Most pages held crooked lines and repeated letters. One page had 3 words. Tom, come Monday. I could not speak. Ruth stood beside me. He wanted you to visit when Daniel came, she said. Why Monday? Daniel visited Mondays. I had always gone Sunday. Safe, scheduled, alone. Dad had been trying to put us in the same room. I had mistaken his request for confusion. Emily touched my shoulder. You did not know. I did not want to know anything that required me to change my mind. That was closer to the truth. We stayed until the afternoon class arrived. Teenagers gathered around the desk, while Patrice explained the adjustable height and low-friction drawers. One boy ran his hand over the joints. Who made it? He asked. Patrice looked at me. 2 brothers, I said. It was not technically accurate. It was emotionally true. The school let me repair the sticking drawer. I returned the next morning with a small roll of tools. Ruth sat near the window while I worked. Emily watched for a while, then left us alone. The problem was simple. The right runner had swollen slightly. I planed it down by less than the width of a fingernail, rubbed wax along the wood, and slid the drawer in. Smooth, Ruth said. Daniel would have done it differently. He always took off too much. She smiled. He said you never took off enough. That made me laugh. And then, without warning, I cried. Not loudly. I kept one hand on the drawer and bent my head until it passed. I had spent years believing forgiveness required deciding who had been right. Daniel lied. Ruth kept secrets. I valued order over mercy. Dad loved both sons and played us against each other sometimes because our competition made him feel important. None of us had clean hands. That did not mean the love was false. After we returned home, I called Kay again. I asked her to tell me about Daniel's last years, not his illness, his life. She told me he taught students who had been removed from regular classrooms. He let them ruin cheap before touching good wood. He cooked eggs badly. He snored. He kept a photograph of Emily at her first school concert beside the bed. He was proud of her, Kay said. He paid for the beginning. He knew. I still have the county fair badge. The pin is too rusted to use. The ribbon has faded almost white. My name remains on the front, though the winning hands were not mine. For years, that would have bothered me. Now I think about all the things we enter under one another's names. A sacrifice mistaken for control. A lie mistaken for protection. Pride mistaken for strength. Silence mistaken for peace. The desk is still in Charleston, opened and closed by students who never knew my father or brother. Every few years, Patrice sends a picture. The drawer still runs smoothly. The 3 names are still underneath, where nobody sees them unless they kneel. That seems right. Some families are held together in places pride does not naturally look.